We're kicking off a new series today called Fallen Empire. Fallen Empire. And what this is tracing the theme of Babylon, which runs from cover to cover in the Bible. Here we are in the book of Genesis, but if you ever get to the book of Revelation, you're going to see Babylon's there too. So there at the beginning, you got Babylon. The word Babel in Hebrew is actually just Babylon. It's not two different words. It's the same word. So the Tower of Babel is the Tower of Babylon. If you flip over to the very end of your Bible, you're going to see it's talking about Babylon. It runs from cover to cover. And we're going to trace the theme of Babylon through the Bible. And we're going to talk about why human empires, human systems of power, why human societies so often go wrong. Like, why do they so often go bad? Why do they so often end up being broken? Why don't things function? I don't know if you heard about the tragedy that happened in Vancouver just yesterday. In Vancouver, an individual, probably with some very racist, prideful, malicious motives, plowed his SUV into a crowd of people, and just horrendous. Why is the world like this? Why is it so broken? And then we're also going to talk about how do we find peace in the midst of it, and not just peace for ourselves, but how do we become ambassadors of peace who carry that peace out into these broken environments that we so consistently find ourselves in. So that's Fallen Empire. Fallen Empire is just tracing the theme of Babylon through the Bible. Now, the message today is called Your Name in Lights. Now, famously, when they build the Tower of Babel, I don't know if you've heard this story before, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, it's pretty well known. But the line that I want to zero in on, it says, "Let us build a tower to the heavens that we may make a name for ourselves." That we may make a name for ourselves. So much of human endeavor is devoted to that exact project, to make a name for yourself. Timothy Chalamet, he won a Screen Actors Guild Award for his portrayal of Bob Dylan, and pretty prestigious actor these days, kind of blown up. And he says this. He says, "I can't downplay the significance of this award. It means the most to me. I know this is subjective business, but the truth is, I'm in pursuit of greatness. I know people usually don't talk like that, but I want to be one of the greats. I'm inspired by the greats. I'm inspired by the greats here tonight, by Daniel Day-Lewis, Marlon Brando, Viola Davis. I'm just as inspired as them as I am by Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps. I want to be up there. I want Timothy Chalamet to name in lights that we may make a name for ourselves." I don't know how you feel about taggers, but that's what taggers are doing, right? They're putting their name out there. They want to get that tag, just go by that stop sign. They're putting their name out there. And I am just constantly stunned by just the audacity of these guys who you ever see a graffiti and you're like, you know what? I have to just be impressed. I don't know how you got up so high. It seems crazy. You could be a Navy SEAL in a different life if you just applied yourself. But I don't know if you saw the documentary Chaos Town. It's on YouTube. You can check it out. But it's about the graffiti culture here in Portland and how it's become a trend now to repel. Like, that's a photo. I used to live right by that bridge. That's a photo of the Fremont Bridge. And I would just go by it, and like 40 feet up in the air, there's this 20-foot tag, and I love what it says. What does it say? It says notice, because that's what taggers want. They want to be noticed. Notice. Like, he's actually got a tag all over the place. But in Chaos Town, this guy actually got them to let him be repelled down the side of the Fremont Bridge, and he tagged his tag monk and notice and all of these different things. But I was revisiting the documentary yesterday, and he goes, you got to make a name for yourself. You got to make a name for yourself. And our culture is constantly telling us to do that, isn't it? That you should do what makes you happy, and you shouldn't sacrifice for anyone. That you need to follow your heart, follow your dreams, pursue your goals relentlessly, and don't let anyone stand in your way. Don't let anyone stop you. Well, I'm sure business owners don't appreciate when taggers take that advice, whether or not how you feel about it. I mean, some people feel like, we're sticking it to our capitalist overlords, and this is an act of defiance and protest to the system. When we tag, I don't know how you feel about it. Maybe it's not, that's no big deal. A tag, it's nothing. It's just property. Who really cares? Well, what happens if you take the pursuit of building a name to yourself to the greatest degree? What happens when there's no checks on your power? What happens when there's absolutely no restraint? There's nobody who can stop you. No one can tell you no. What does that look like? Well, I'll tell you what it looks like. In The Economist, there was an article by Arkady Ostrovsky, who's the Russian correspondent of The Economist, and he says this about the war in Ukraine and Putin invading a smaller economy, a neighboring nation, and absolutely just relentlessly bombing them, obliterating them. And obviously they made such a valiant, I don't know, I think it's incredible the way they've stood up to this tyrant. But he says this carnage has been brought about by Vladimir Putin's obsession to become one of Russia's historic gatherers of lands. As Putin himself hinted in recent remarks, he wants to go down in history with the czars, Alexei III, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and Stalin as rulers who expanded the boundaries and political influence of Mother Russia. Timothy Chalamet wants to make a name for himself. Notice wants to make a name for himself. Vladimir Putin wants to make a name for himself. And what stands before us as the archetype of all unchecked power, pride, and greed is Babylon. When all restraints are thrown off, when there's nobody in your way, there's nothing stopping you, what do? You ruthlessly invade a nation. What do? You build a tower to the heavens. So, that's where we are, your name in lights. Our first thought today is rejecting God's wisdom is a slow motion train wreck. Rejecting God's wisdom is a slow motion train wreck. Now, I'm going to give you a little recap on the first chapters of Genesis, because really, all the way from 3 to 11 is the whole fall narrative. The fall isn't just what happens in the Garden of Eden with the fruit. The fall narrative runs from chapter 3 all the way to chapter 11. Now, my view on the book of Genesis doesn't come from people caving to Darwin or anything like that. My view goes back to St. Augustine, and that's that the book of Genesis is way more about who and why than how and when. Because what do Christians do sometimes in the U.S. specifically? We fight about when. When? Was it 7 days? Was this? Is it old earth? Is it young earth? Is it theistic evolution? Is that heresy? Is that evil to believe that? Is it okay? And then, if you're like me and you grow up like kind of in a low-key fundamentalist background, you go to the zoo and you're having like panic attacks. You're like, 300 million years old. You're so stressed out. But I just want to put you at ease and say with St. Augustine, the book of Genesis is more about who and why than when and how. I believe that God made the world, and I believe why he made the world for his glory, and that we would love one another. As far as the when and the how, I don't think that's really what Genesis is so much focused on. But why does God make the world? Well, the Bible depicts God not as a warrior like the Mesopotamian myths. It depicts God as an artist who loves to share. And he wants to share his good world. He wants to be in a partnership with humanity, to spread blessing, to spread goodness all throughout creation. But humanity rebels, and they have the opportunity, because in any relationship there has to be, and for there to be real faith, for there to be real trust, there has to be the opportunity to distrust, and humanity rebels and destroys the partnership, and it plunges itself. You see Adam and Eve, immediately there's suspicion. Immediately there's blame. Adam's blaming his wife. There's distrust. There's division. There's alienation. There's breakdown. Then you get to their siblings. There's Cain and Abel, and the very next story replays the fall story. Because Cain and Abel, there's sibling rivalry, there's jealousy, and Cain murders his brother in cold blood. Then as you continue on from Cain, you get to a guy named Lamech. And Lamech is the descendant of Cain. And if you've ever read the Bible and gone, why are all these guys polygamists? Is God cool with polygamy? Abraham's a polygamist, Solomon's a polygamist. There's polygamy left and right. Hey, there's a very important rule of biblical study. That's the law of first mention. Want to know who the first polygamist is? It's Cain's descendant, Lamech. He's the first polygamist. It says that he took 2 wives for himself. In the garden, it was 1 man, 1 woman. But Lamech, what does he do? I want 2. I want 2 wives for myself. And then what does Lamech do? He's a violent, brutal man, and he boasts and brags. He says, Cain killed his brother Abel, and I killed a man just for slapping me. And if Cain gets avenged 7 times, then let Lamech be revenged 70 times. And so violence starts to spiral out of control, and he's amassing sex, and he's amassing power, and this violence is spreading. And as humanity is rejecting God's way of wisdom, which is all about sharing, and which is all about beauty, and humanity rejects the sharing, rejects the beauty, rejects God, and it pursues greed and violence and chaos and destruction. And it eventually spirals so much that when you get to the flood narrative, God doesn't go, I'm angry at man, I hate man, man's horrible. No, when you get to the flood narrative in Genesis chapter 6, it says that God's heart was broken because he saw that violence had spread throughout the whole earth. It says that he was full of sorrow, that the evil of man's heart had gotten to the point where it was their imaginations were only evil continually, and that the whole earth was filled with violence. So as humanity is destroying itself, just in generation after generation of just bloodthirst and vengeance, God says, you know what, I'm going to uncreate everything. I'm just going to speed up the process of destruction as an act of mercy and wipe the slate clean, because in the Bible's in a cultural context that's very important to remember. I guess I'll just say this real briefly. A lot of us understand that Paul, when he's writing, he's talking to the Judaizers. Like, he's in a cultural context. He's writing to the Judaizers. When John writes John, he's addressing the Gnostics. He's in a cultural context. Well, the same thing's true of Genesis. Genesis exists within a cultural context. And in that cultural context, waters were a sign of death and destruction and uncreation and chaos. And so the Bible's, God uncreates the world in the flood. And then he starts over with a family. So we've got Adam and Eve, we've got Cain and Abel, we've got Lamech. Now we get to Noah, but then sadly, humanity is still broken. The partnership's still not there. You know, the Messiah hasn't come. God has promised that there'd be a seed who would crush evil, but that seed hasn't come yet. They're still waiting. And so after Noah comes Nimrod. And Nimrod, he comes, and it says that he was a violent hunter on the earth. And if you look in Genesis chapter 10, over and over again, it emphasizes power. It says Nimrod was powerful, powerful, powerful. He was mighty, mighty, mighty. That's for emphasis. Because, and what has he found? He founds Assyria, and he founds Babylon. He's the founder of these cities. And what are they about in these cities? What is Babylon really about? It's about human power. It's about human empire. It's about empire building. It's about establishing yourself, dominating others. God had said in Genesis 1:28 that he wanted to spread his blessing. Go spread my blessing throughout the earth is the Genesis 1:28 command. But here what happens at Babylon? They come to hoard. They said, let us not scatter. Let's not spread the blessing. Let's hoard our power, lest we be scattered across the earth. Let's hoard. It's consolidating power. It's self-aggrandizement. It's self-protection. It's amassing power for themselves. And that brings us to verse 4. So let's look at verse 4. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we shall be scattered across the earth. See, God's vision is always outward oriented. It's spreading the blessing. But this is about hoarding, it's about amassing, it's hunkering down, it's self-protection, and then ultimately it's self-glorification, self-aggrandizement. Let us exalt our name to the heavens. We will be God. That's the heart of it. I'll show you a picture of a ziggurat of likely what the Tower of Babel looked like. So in Mesopotamia, they built these towers like this, and that's likely what it was constructed. It looks pretty similar to the Mayan pyramids. It's actually the prototype of the eventually becomes the Egyptian pyramids, but this is here in Assyria, Babylon. This is what they were building, and their goal was to exalt themselves to the heavens. They wanted to be their own God. Heaven is God's dwelling place. They say, we're going to be God. We're going to ascend to the heavens. Richard Middleton, got this quote on the screen for you. He had an insight that I think is absolutely tremendous about the languages thing, is that Babel's emphasis on one language represents the ancient policy of indoctrinating foreigners into their supposedly superior language and culture. That's kind of interesting. I feel like that has some relevance for every empire, for every colony building enterprise, of indoctrinating foreigners into their supposedly superior language and culture. The Assyrian king Ashurbanipal II, for instance, said he made the totality of people speak one speech. Sargon II boasted populations of the 4 world quarters with strange tongues and incompatible speech, whom I've taken as booty by the might of my scepter. I cause to accept a single voice. So what I'm trying to show you here is I believe that the Tower of Babel actually happened. But I think it's important that how it happened be anchored in its historical ancient context and in its literary context. But I believe that it actually happened. But I just think it's so fascinating here. It's consolidating power. It's forcing everyone to speak their language. It's not about spreading. It's not about blessing. It's not about others. It's really about oppressing. And we're going to get into this more in the coming weeks. But the Hebrew Bible is just absolutely genius in the way that it's designed. And here it says, let us burn bricks. So they start burning bricks. Before they were using stacking rocks, stacking stones, right? The Stone Age, you'd say. But here they have this new technology where they can bake bricks. But who else likes to make people bake bricks in the Bible? Pharaoh. And that theme gets carried on. And so it doesn't emphasize it here, but I think what's implied by what Richard Middleton is saying and what's implied by the biblical authors through the baking of bricks is who's baking those bricks? Slaves. The violence, the bloodshed, the jealousy, the Lamech, I'll take 2 wives for myself. I'll be avenged 70 times. Nimrod, this mighty, 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 powerful, powerful, powerful man on the earth, founds a city, and it's Babylon. It's where we don't share, we don't bless, we amass, we hoard, we oppress, we trample. Why? So we can exalt ourselves. And I think Timothy Chalamet is awesome. It's fantastic. It's great to have goals and be aspirational. But when we pursue our way of building a name for ourselves, and we say, I'm going to do it no matter the cost, who are we willing to trample on? Who are we willing to neglect? I've said it before, but how common is it somebody pursues their career and they're cutthroat at work. They're stabbing people in the back. They'll do whatever they can. They'll trick people. How many people, they neglect their family. They treat their spouse like garbage. They treat their kids like nothing. Why? Because they need to go and build a name for themselves. They need to go follow their dreams, and they can't let anyone hold them back, and they can't let anyone stand in their way. It's Babylon. It's Babylon. We're doing the same thing that humanity has always done. Our next thought is that you can find good things even in fallen places. You can find good things even in fallen places. Now, here we are in downtown Portland, right? Like we're in a city. And here it says, come, let us make a city and a tower that reaches to the heavens. And so we're in a city. And this probably isn't like an issue we have because here we are in downtown Portland, but maybe in churches you've been a part of in the past, maybe in other parts of the state, maybe in the suburbs, maybe in small towns, maybe in other parts of the country, other parts of the nation, there can sometimes be a mentality like, yeah, cities are bad. Cities are dirty. You know who starts the first city? The first city in the Bible, it's Cain. You know who starts the second city? It's Nimrod. It's Babylon. You know, the next city, it's Sodom and Gomorrah. Cities are trash. Cities are evil. That's the corrupt place where all those wicked, evil city dwellers live. You know, and there can be that kind of Christianity that views it that way. But I think this passage, if you look at the whole biblical storyline, the Psalm speaks highly of cities. Ultimately, in the book of Revelation, and by the way, the purpose of the Bible isn't about going to heaven one day and going to some immaterial reality. The whole storyline of the Bible is that God is going to come redeem his creation. He's going to come set the world right. There's going to be resurrection. There's going to be a new creation where we feast and we dance and we create and we build and we laugh. But in the book of Revelation, it ends in a city. Jesus, Keller said this, but Keller said Jesus is going to live downtown. Like, he's going to live downtown at the end of Revelation. And so cities can't be all bad. And I'm going to make my case even stronger, that you can find good things even in fallen places. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 21, right after it says Cain founds the first city, it says, Jubal was the father of all who played the stringed instruments and pipes. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools and bronze and iron. Get this, Cain founds the first city, and his descendants, what don't they invent? They invent the harp, and they invent pipes and stringed instruments. They invent music. And dozens upon dozens upon dozens of times throughout the rest of the Hebrew Bible do they go, oh, those dirty Canaanites, those dirty Cain guys, they invented the harp. Stay away from that filthy pagan music. No. Hundreds of times throughout the Hebrew Bible, it commands them to play the harp. It commands them to play the pipes, to play the cymbals. And I think this is really important for us because in Albuquerque, which is probably a more Christianized setting than Portland is, it probably resembles some of the smaller towns in Oregon or even the suburbs of Oregon or whatever. But you kind of do find this Christian subculture that starts to go, we only watch Christian movies. We only listen to Christian music. We only, The Chosen. That's the only thing they watch. I remember there's this car wash that had like a Christian fish on it. It's like, oh, good. I can go to the Christian car wash, and I can go to the Christian mechanic, and then I can go over and get my Christian chicken and listen to my Christian music at Chick-fil-A that's closed on Sunday, so I got to find somewhere else to go. I get this Christian place. It's like if we would like it if there was Christian toilet paper, so we could wipe our little Christian tushes. Like just everything's got to be so Christian. And I can understand that impulse, but isn't that kind of just another way of hoarding? Of coming together and building your own little enclave, your own little safe place, your own little suburb where we're not like those bad people out there. We're the good people. We're not going to be scattered across the earth. We're going to be here and build a city for ourselves and build a name for ourselves. But the Bible is constantly inviting us out to bless the world, to have an outward-oriented mindset, to have a mindset that says, I want to bless the nations. I want to bless my neighbors. I want to take God's blessing elsewhere. And we can find good and beautiful and redemptive things that even come from the line of Cain, metaphorically. Like Cain he's obviously murders his brother. He's obviously not Seth. The Messiah comes from Adam and Eve's other kid, Seth. But the line of Cain, they invent music. And that music gets used to the glory of God. The line of Cain invents cities. Cities become used for the glory of God. You see where I'm going with this? That I think a more robust and biblical Christianity isn't this one where we go, oh, they're those bad people over there and we're the good people over here. What if instead we thought we're all people made in God's image and yet broken in need of redemption? What if we looked out the world in those categories? That we're all people still made in the image of God, and the image of God means that we reflect God's character. We were meant to reflect God's goodness. We were meant to reflect His name, because in the Bible the word name means reputation and character. We were meant to reflect His name, but we've shattered it, we've broken it. But even broken places still show glimmers of God's goodness. And obviously, here at Counterculture, we talk about the problems of Portland, the dysfunction, but I just want to say I love Portland. This is a beautiful city. It's filled with beautiful people that are full of ingenuity and creativity, who care about justice, who care about the vulnerable, who are, there's spectacular food that's just mind-blowing and cool places. I mean, yesterday I was on the rooftop at Revolution Hall, just like overlooking the city, and it's just like, there's so much good here. And we as Christians should celebrate the good where we find it. John Calvin, and I'm no Calvinist, but I completely agree with John Calvin, the French theologian here. He's famous for Calvinism, but I completely agree with Calvin on this point. He's talking about reading pagan authors. I think he's even talking about reading like Plato and the classics. In reading profane authors, the admirable light of truth displayed in them should remind us that the human mind, however much fallen and perverted from its original integrity, is still adorned and invested with admirable gifts from its Creator. So he's saying, hey, non-Christians still have these beautiful gifts from their Creator. They're so made in God's image. If the Lord has been pleased to assist us by the work and ministry of ungodly physics, dialectics, mathematics, and other similar sciences, let us avail ourselves of it. I think it has done horrible harm when Christians have gone, I'm not going to listen to the CDC. Those are horrible pagan liberals. I'm not going to listen to the CDC. I'm not going to do what they say. Or I'm not going to do this. Hey, let me ask a question. Are we saved by how much we know about every imaginable subject? No. Are we saved because we're smarter than everybody? Are we saved because we know better than everybody? No, we're saved by grace. Well, I only want to listen to a Christian doctor. I only want to listen to this person. It's like, well, your refrigerator probably wasn't made by a Christian, but you come every time it calls. It's like, to have that mentality that says, I'll only listen to people who are Christians, it's like, that's not even a biblical thought process. We're going to see later on in the series, there are good things in Babylon. And we're supposed to seek the peace of Babylon. We're saved by grace, not by how much we know about every other subject. So we should listen to experts, and we should respect the image of God in people's field. Okay. Our next thought today, and I always love the review. You can always count on me for the recap. But the recap is rejecting God's wisdom is a slow motion train wreck. So rejecting God's wisdom is a slow motion train wreck. Next thing is you can find good things even in fallen places. And then our final thought today is, in the end, pride divides, but humility brings unity. Pride divides, but humility brings unity. So this message has been about making a name for yourself and the way that can go so wrong and become horrible and corrupt and oppressive and living according to humans' wisdom, saying, we're going to do it our way, God, not your way, and the way that goes wrong. But we've been talking about how God, in His grace, He still allows people to have wisdom and gifts, and Cain's line made musical instruments and whatnot. But let's go back to this idea of pride. And making a name for ourselves is what so many people are interested in. I read an article in Scientific American interviewing where they did a survey with 10 and 12-year-olds. And the number one thing 10 and 12-year-olds wanted to be was famous. Not that they wanted to, better the world and be doctors or solve problems. Not even that they wanted to have a family and get married one day and have kids. But the number one goal of kids today is just to be famous. There was a Harris poll that came out and said the same thing, that the top desire amongst teenagers today is just to be influencers, to be YouTubers or podcasters or TikTok stars. Just like the number one thing, just trying to get my name out there. I need likes, I need views, I need followers, I need validation. But don't we feel how exhausting that is? Don't we feel how tiring that is? Seeking it, this is a documented fact in psychology. That pursuit to be famous makes us anxious. It's why there's so much anxiety. It's why there's all these mental health issues, just constantly pursuing that. It exhausts us. A lot of the reason why people move to cities is to make a name for themselves. When Beck and I first came to Portland, we moved here in 2015, and at that point, Portland was the fastest growing city in America. All right, Fred Armisen was doing his thing, Portlandia. We actually met him on Mississippi. It was really funny. Portlandia was blowing up, just all the donut shops, the best coffee in the world. They'd say it was the place where young people go to retire. But what happened? Were those people coming to Portland because they wanted to bless Portland? Were all those people, moving across the country here because I want to make Portland a better place. I want to go care for the needy and the vulnerable in Portland and help those people. No, they were coming there because they wanted to put it in their Instagram bio. And that's, same Brooklyn bound. You put that in your bio. Now everybody's moved to Nashville and Boise. But when things got hard, what did people do? They bailed. They left. And we saw an exodus. I think I saw one stat that said 40,000 people left Portland in 1 year. Because when things got hard, because people weren't coming here to love the city. They were coming here to use the city. To use the city. And so don't we see that when we try to build a name for ourselves and we're trying to just establish ourselves and become something, don't we see that it's exhausting, that it makes us anxious, that it deteriorates us as individuals, but then it also deteriorates communities? Those people who just came to use and suck Portland dry and then get out of Dodge the second time things got hard, that's what ends up happening. Now look at verse 5. It says, they were speaking the same language. They had not begun. Then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they'll not understand each other. I just want to pay homage for a brief second to this whole idea of building a tower to the heavens and God saying nothing will be withheld from them. The Tower of Babel is essentially saying the exact same thing as the TV show Black Mirror. It's that when humans try to play God, because that's what Babel's about, it's about building a tower to the heavens, we'll be in the place of God. We're going to invade heaven, basically what they were trying to do. It's like what Jeff Goldblum says in Jurassic Park. I just love Jeff Goldblum. He's hilarious. He's just got this confidence to him, this calm confidence. But what does he go? Your scientists were so obsessed with whether or not they could do it, they never took time to stop and see if they should do it. And that's what Black Mirror is saying to us, that when human beings try to play God, and obviously there's a good side to technology. Not like I said, they invented music, they invented bronze, they invented all the brass making. All of that can be used for good. But I mean, you think about Neuralink, and you think about the metaverse, which was a huge flop, by the way. Like when you think about trying to live in this virtual reality world, or CRISPR gene editing. Have you heard about this, where they want to make designer babies, where you can design what color your baby's eyes will have with gene editing? Like when humans try to play God, it ends up in chaos and ruin. It ends up in dysfunction and destruction. It doesn't lead anywhere good. Now God comes and he confuses the language, and I believe the story actually happened. To what extent, to what capacity, I'm not going to get bogged down in that. That's for another time, but I believe this story actually happened. But I also believe this story communicates something that is universally true. And that's that in the end, pride divides and humility brings unity. I was walking through downtown Portland, and I saw a poster with some politicians on it. You can fill in the blank of who they were. But it said this. This was so Portland, man. It said, nonviolence is their power. Fight back. Fight back. It's so Portland. But I think it is telling and instructive to us that so often when you build these movements of violence and you build these movements to fight back, and you build a movement that is based on bitter discontent, oftentimes those same forces end up swallowing its own leaders. And I'll tell you what I mean. Look at the French Revolution. Just like the Tower of Babel, it ends in division. It ends in fragmentation. They're so mad at the bourgeoisie. Let's eat the rich. But then how does the French Revolution end? A lot of people don't know this. Maximilien Robespierre gets guillotined in his own guillotine. Because he's going, they're corrupt, they're evil, they're wrong. Look, everybody, aren't we mad that they're corrupt, they're evil? Well, then what's out? All of them are gone. They go, well, hey, you're corrupt, you're evil, you're going down. It ends up divided and fragmented and splintered. The same thing happened with the Irish Republic Army in the Irish Civil War, the IRA. I want to know how the IRA ended. It ended splintered, fragmented, infighting, division, because that pride, that anger, that vengeful spirit ends up cannibalizing itself, sabotaging itself. I'm sure there were other factors with the FBI here, so I want to tread softly with this. I know that this could be a delicate subject, but the same thing happened with the Black Panthers. It ended with assassination attempts where they were killing each other and fighting against each other. I'm told by people who were really in on it and a part of it that the same thing happened in 2020 here in Portland. That this huge national movement that was making international headlines here in Portland in 2020, that it ended splintered and fragmented with factions and infighting and you're not legit enough, and no, you're not legit enough, and it all cannibalized in on itself. So what am I going to be doing inviting us in the series is, like often, what the Bible's inviting us to do is to first confront the Babylon that's in our own hearts. To confront the issues, to humble ourselves, and to look at the Babylon that takes place in our own hearts, and to realize there's pride, there's greed, there's injustice, there's self-indulgence in us that needs to be confronted. And then when we come in that place of humility, it opens us up to be people who love and share and who are outward-minded. Instead of hoarding and consolidating and amassing, we become people who are outward-oriented to bless the city, to bless our neighbors, to bless the world. I want to use an example from my own life. So this is all about making a name for yourself. You probably know this, but in case you don't, it is incredibly easy to use the name of Jesus just to build up your own name. It's incredibly easy to say, oh yeah, I'm all about Jesus' name. We want to make Jesus famous, but you're really just trying to make yourself famous. And my job, my first job as a pastor, before anything else, is to constantly bring my heart in humility before God and go, God, I have bad motives. I have that ego, that desire, I want likes, I want views, I want power, I want to be known, I want to make a name for myself. And to come and bring that before God. And here's the thing I use on myself constantly that you can use on yourself too, is that Jesus loves me even though I have bad motives. And that's the thing that gives me good motives. Jesus loves me even though I'm prideful. And that's the thing that truly makes me loving and humble. And when I remember that Jesus, he loved me and sought to bless me when I didn't deserve it, I want to show you where the next chapter, because I think one day we'll probably teach through the whole book of Genesis or something, but I can't resist showing you this from Genesis chapter 12. Look at what happens next. So he calls somebody out of Babylon, because Ur of the Chaldees, we're looking at all these ancient words, but Chaldea is Babylon. So here's Abraham. Where does Abraham come from? He comes from Babylon. And out of Babylon, he says, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. Whoa. I will make your name great. But not to hoard it, not to oppress, not to consolidate your power. No, you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And in you, all the peoples of the earth will be blessed. And then jumping to chapter 15, he took Abraham outside and said, look up at the sky, count the stars, if indeed you can count them. So shall your offspring be. I'll put your name in lights. And so, if you're here today and you have desires, you go, well, I do want to be successful. I do want to, make something of myself. I do want to. Here's the thing. If you make your goal making the name of Jesus famous, because Jesus is all about sharing and he's all about blessing, his character, his name is love. If you make your life about Jesus' name, he'll take care of your name. He'll honor your name. He'll exalt you. Check out this verse real fast. I'm just going to blow through a couple verses. 2 Chronicles 16:9. You should memorize this. The eyes of the Lord look throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. God wants to strengthen you. He's looking for somebody who's in line with his vision of wisdom, of love and justice and peace. And when you make your life about his name, he'll get on board with your name. He'll exalt you. He'll lift you up. He'll use you to bless the world like Abraham. We'll call the band back up on stage as we move towards communion. I started the talk today talking about graffiti artists, and them rappelling from buildings to make a name for themselves. I have a friend who was really into the graffiti scene. He was a big tagger and tagged all over the Pacific Northwest. And I was talking with him, and he has since actually come to Christ and become a pastor. He's a pastor up in Seattle. But he said he never knew his dad. He came from a broken, dysfunctional home. He had a very difficult upbringing with alcoholics and whatnot, and he went on to be a skater and a tagger and a street artist, graffiti artist and whatnot. And he said, you want to know why I put my name out there like that, Jesse? Because I just didn't want to be invisible. I tagged those signs. I spray painted those walls. I just wanted something that goes, I exist. I'm significant. I matter. And I think so much of the damage that's done, the guy driving the car through the crowd, I think the mass shooters who go and shoot up high schools, they want to make a name for themselves. They want to go down in history. They want to matter because there's pain, there's brokenness. How can we know that we matter? How can we know that we have a name? How can we know that we're significant, but do it in a way that turns us into people of love, not destruction? Well, I'll tell you how. Check out this. Isaiah 49:16. God's talking to his people, and he says, see, I have written your name on the palms of my hands. You want to know that you matter? You want to stop having to fight to prove yourself at work and prove that you're the top dog and fight on Instagram to get attention and get likes and be devastated when you don't get the likes and feel, I just got to, if this guy liked me and he thought I was beautiful, then I would know that I'm something. Then I would know that I really exist. If I wasn't single, then it would count. If I just had more money in the bank and my house was more beautiful, then I'd have a name. I could build a name for myself. You want to know what will give you a name is this. There were spikes driven through Jesus' palms for you. Your name has been inscribed upon his hands. Jesus' name was put to shame so that our name could be justified. Jesus was disgraced so that we could be children of glory. And that's what communion is. We're going to take communion now. We're going to remember we have a name. And like I often say here at Counterculture, if it's a name that's available to everyone, we don't have to look down on anyone. Mm-hmm. We can share. We can become outward-minded people of blessing. who give and go instead of hoard and amass.